There are currently 30 killers in Dead by Daylight, and some are known to be significantly stronger than others. In today's video, I'll rank all of them, including the Knight, which is currently on the PDB. Obviously, everyone might rank the killers differently, but I'll try to take all variables in account and place every killer as objectively as possible. Feel free to leave your opinion in the comments down below. Oh, thank you, GigaChat. Another important note is that I consider every kill in a game to be good, and the placement will just indicate the relative strength to each other. Every game and player is different, and my top tier choices may get absolutely gen rushed, and my low placed killers also may just thread through survivors in some games. In my placement, I'll factor in how they should perform in any skill level on any map and how consistent the results should be when you get the hang of them. We'll start at the bottom of the list and then work our way up to the strongest killer in the current state of the game. Let's jump right into it. Probably not surprising, but my lowest ranked killer is the Trapper. He got the worst early game, trap spawn everywhere around the map, and you need to invest a lot of time to pick them up and actually get your power going. His survivors bring team perks like Prove Yourself that can quickly turn the game against the Trapper. On top of that, he has no real way to catch up to survivors and basically relies on survivors making mistakes. Mindful survivors will spot traps early and generally know which areas to avoid or be careful at, basically making the Trapper a straight up M1 killer. He's also very map dependent, as traps are significantly stronger in maps with tall grass. The one thing Trapper can really shine at is tunneling at certain spots, like the basement for example. Then we have Freddy, and he faces similar problems. If survivors play coordinated, they only need to invest very little time to stay outside of the dream world, where Freddy is a very basic M1 killer. The snares do nothing and the teleport is slower, but he can take advantage of big maps and actually pull off some nice perk combos with his teleport. The add-ons are not very good for the most part and make him barely any better, with some exceptions. Next up is Michael Myers, and he is a bit odd to rank because in his basic form he's a killer with many flaws, but he has add-ons that make him an absolute beast. Myers starts the game undetectable, just like a stealth killer, but unlike other stealth killers, he can't use that to his advantage and get a hit off. He needs to invest time to stalk people just to later be able to do very basic stuff. That leaves him with a very slow early game. On tier 2 he becomes more or less a basic M1 killer with some stat improvements, like a smaller terror radius and slightly faster vaulting and movement speed. And at that point you still haven't achieved anything yet. Then eventually you'll reach tier 3 and Myers becomes really good for a short period of time. He's even faster and able to insta on survivors. In tier 3 you're likely to down a survivor, but other survivors will just avoid you and go for the unhook once tier 3 runs out, so you'll usually get about one hook per tier 3. But Myers tremendously changes when you take a look at his add-ons. He has add-ons that make you stay in tier 3 for an infinite amount of time, and add-ons that allow you to just grab healthy survivors that are close to you and instantly take them out of the game. If you play with these add-ons, Myers is obviously way up in this list. On the next spot we have the Clown, and he is also a basic M1 killer. His bottles allow you to slow down survivors and make many loops, especially smaller ones, completely unsafe. And they're usually also effective on strong structures like TLs for example. His add-ons are honestly not bad. He's for example able to expose survivors or read their auras, which is always good. The Clown's weakness obviously comes from his lack of mobility. It's hard for him to deal with survivors that split up since he has essentially no map presence. Moving up onto the next tier we have Wraith. He's also a basic M1 killer but has some tools to work with. He starts the game in completely unannounced stealth, which allows him often to get a very early surprise hit off. He can reach spots quickly with his increased movement speed while cloaked, he can catch up to survivors, and he can body block structures or windows while uncloaking. The problems start to pile in though when survivors become aware. They'll play around these things and can even stun the Wraith out of his cloak with flashlights when spotted early enough. The game also gets increasingly harder when survivors bring a lot of medkits and endurance perks, as the Wraith has very little ways to deal with that. Then we have the Legion. The main component of Legion's kit is the slowdown he gets with forcing survivors to mend. He has good mobility to catch up to survivors and injure them. He is the strongest when survivors group up and has decent add-ons that support that playstyle and sometimes force survivors to stay close to each other. Similar problems like on a Wraith though. When survivors become aware, they'll just split up and invest as little time in healing as possible, making part of Legion's kit very underwhelming. Most of the endurance perks however aren't very good against him. He's usually able to catch up, and that also can't be used in deep wound. The Legion is able to force survivors to play a certain way, but it sometimes may be really hard to actually end games to his favor. Moving on to the Pig. The pig tries to do many things, but doesn't really excel at one of them. The stealth and the ambush are mediocre at best, and that usually leads to a rather hard early game for the pig. However, once you get the game going and install reverse bear traps on survivors, the pig suddenly gets a tool to nicely drag out games and maybe even get a cheeky early kill in the game. She can even benefit from playing on larger maps in some ways, as survivors need to make more distance to remove the traps. She's a bit reliant on add-ons to make the best out of her kit, and most of the time has a hard early game. Next up, the Ghostface. And he starts off with great unannounced stealth that usually gives him a decent early game. If you can mark people right away, he may get a very early down. It definitely takes a certain skill set to acquire to be good with Ghostface, but once you get good with 99ing the exposure bar on survivors, the Ghostface can really become a threat to deal with. The same thing also applies the other way around. When things don't work your way and you often get revealed, you're left with very little tools to work with. He got decent add-ons, but it's sometimes hard to make good use out of them. He's definitely a very unforgiving killer to play. Then we have Sadako. She has some things going for her, but also some major flaws. Let's start off with Condemned. A survivor can become condemned mostly by picking up videotapes, but unfortunately most of the time there's no real incentive whatsoever for a survivor to pick up one of these. Once fully condemned, Sadako can mori these survivors. And don't get me wrong, there are certainly some niche Sadako builds that focus on building up Condemned that may end games very quickly, but it's also not really consistent and comparatively takes a lot of effort to pull off. But Sadako generally has strong map pressure, which may turn games into her favor. Moving on to the Doctor. The Doctor lacks any sort of mobility, but gets good information about survivors with his active ability. The thing that may make Doctor hard to deal with is his slowdown. Survivors need to snap out of Madness 3 before being able to work on certain tasks, and Madness effects can be extremely powerful when paired with certain perks. The most iconic combination being Merciless Storm, which becomes tremendously harder to deal with than on any other killer. He also has good add-ons which allow for different playstyles and make him decently unpredictable. Next on the list, the Trickster. Well, let's start off with, the Trickster is difficult. You need to become really good with the knives to be effective with him. Sometimes hitting not enough knives or losing too much distance or generally being kited around tall loops may make Trickster lose a lot of time without achieving anything, as he doesn't really have the toolkit to deal with these situations. He's very map dependent but can also just tear away health states when he catches a survivor in the open. Then we have Hillbilly. And he used to be really strong, and on paper he still has a nice kit. Although a bit clunky to use, he got some mobility and can read spots across the map quickly. He can instant on survivors and quickly break pallets. Windows are pretty strong against him as they completely counter his chainsaw, so he may often be forced to bring Bamboozle to shift these loops more into his favor. But Billy unfortunately didn't age well with the game. Map layouts used to be more in his favor, and he can often be very hard to pull off effectively nowadays. His add-ons aren't the best either, and most of them are rather underwhelming. Moving on to Deathslinger. The biggest issue of Slinger is his low mobility. When survivors split up and play smart around the map, he has lots of trouble catching up and applying pressure on them. He is however very good in 1v1 scenarios and can usually get a hit in most situations, getting them either knocked or forcing them to mend, applying some nice slowdown to the game. He also has pretty good add-ons to be honest, one of them for example allowing him to get insta-downs. Then we have Nemesis. Let's start off with his weaknesses. Well, we have his zombies. In most of the games, they just do nothing and aren't anything more than maybe a small minigame or a groaning soundbox to survivors. He needs to get off an extra hit when survivors aren't infected, and his add-ons are extremely bad for the most part. But why is he still this far up this list? Honestly, it's his whip. Once he reaches tier 2, he absolutely loves breaking things and can just shred through pallets and walls. He makes small loops unsafe as he can just whip straight over them, and is also able to whip through windows. If he's used to his full potential, he is actually extremely scary to play against. Demo is in my opinion in a pretty nice spot right now. He gets a little bit of everything and allows for some different approaches and playstyles. You can get information around the portals, close gaps, break stuff, and also travel quickly between positions around the map. He definitely makes a scary killer and gets even better due to his good add-ons. Well, Bubba. I kinda hate to say it, but he's not a bad killer. His kit certainly allows to down a lot of survivors, but it also attracts a very certain kind of sadistic players. First things first, he's extremely good at camping and tunneling. When you're defending a strong hook, it may almost be impossible for survivors to get an unhook. And some people just like to exploit that. If you take camping away, he definitely moves down the list, but still has some things going for him. He can break walls and pallets very quickly and is generally very punishing due to his insta-downing with the chainsaw. He also got good add-ons and is, just like Billy, usually somewhat forced to bring Bamboozle to be stronger in loops with windows. Next up is the Dredge. And the Dredge is, in my opinion, a very flexible killer that can be really unpredictable. His teleport is great and probably the best in the game. He can quickly be anywhere in the map and therefore has really good map pressure in almost any map. During nighttime, the teleport can actually be used in chases as well. He can use his remnant as a tool in loops, but it got some counterplays to it and especially falls off against organized teams. The remnant can be easily destroyed with flash threats and is no counterplay to survivors just switching to a different loop. Then onto the twins. And they're actually pretty good. Unfortunately, they suffer from the current meta, where survivors will bring a ton of ways to get extra health states or just heal themselves. Charlotte herself is a basic M1 killer, but Victor is very strong. It's easy to injure or down survivors with him, and if the survivors don't have enough resources, that Vince will just take them apart. Any perks that reduce potential heals on survivors are great. You can, for example, bring Franklin's and get rid of some medkits. And survivors will need to have a certain amount of teamwork to be successful against the twins. Next we have the Pinhead. And he's an extremely strong basic M1 killer, but also is a bit hard to master. But once you become really good with him, he's a menace to deal with. He has built-in slowdown and his chains often allow him to catch up and get hits out on survivors. It's a great anti-loop power, but may also cost you a lot of time if you keep missing them. And then we also have the box, which sets great pinheads apart from good pinheads. The spawn location of the box is dependent on the positioning of all survivors and Pinhead himself. A great Pinhead will lay that map down in his head and can roughly pinpoint down where the box may spawn. And if you're good at defending the box, the slowdown survivors will experience is horrendous. It's still a bit RNG, but it can definitely get more reliable with practice. And now with the hack, we move up to the A tier. Just like Billy, she didn't really age that well and is generally a bad meta for her right now, but she's definitely more reliable. The Hag is a rather slow walking killer and her playstyle usually revolves around placing smart traps and getting quick, unexpected hits off on survivors. In the current meta, survivors will heal often, bring a lot of second chance exhaustion perks or just have extra health states, with which the Hag can't really deal well. She used to be amazing at defending hooks, but that also got a lot weaker since we got base kit borrowed time. She's a bit map dependent, but can apply a lot of pressure. She definitely needs to be played in a specific playstyle, but if played effectively is still a really strong killer. Next up, the Huntress. If you've watched certain Huntress mains, you'll know that she has a very high skill ceiling and can pull off really impressive stuff. All around she can be extremely oppressive and pressure hooks, chants and exit gates from long ranges. And she has even strong add-ons that make her even better. She's overall just a good killer and gets balanced with her lullaby, which announces every move she does. Then onto a recent addition, Wesker. He's a fast moving killer, can make quite some distance with his dashes and is pretty oppressive all around the map. He got a terror radius of 40 meters, which is really big and makes for great synergies with terror radius perks, as you will often see in game. Overall he got very good add-ons, but is a bit dependent on maps, as his power is definitely stronger in open spaces. Next with the Pyramid Head. His range attack is great and can get you hits off you otherwise wouldn't. It's a strong tool around loops and even through obstructed structures if you know the location of survivors. It's not quite instant and needs you to slightly predict the movement of survivors, but can often reliably be used on seasoned players. He saves a lot of time as he rarely has to carry survivors to hooks and is decent at tunneling, as survivors sent to the cage won't get base kit endurance when unhooked. He can decide wins very quickly, especially on smaller maps, as the only thing he really lacks is mobility. His add-ons aren't really great. There aren't usually any elements of surprise apart from maybe getting some cheeky hits with the extra range add-on on his power. Moving on to the Oni. And the Oni can really be a sort of all or nothing killer. He got a weak early game and may easily lose chance if he isn't able to get a hit off to channel his power. But once he unlocks his power, he gets so many different tools that make him extremely strong. He can quickly move around the map, he can insta on people, and if you become really good at him, you can learn so many different things with his movements that often make him very unpredictable and will catch survivors by surprise. If you've mastered this killer, he's definitely one of the strongest in the game. Now onto the Plague. She has a very different playstyle to most of the killers high up in this list, but that's due to the fact that her kit just perfectly counters the current meta, where medkits and healing perks are more popular than ever before. If you get people infected, they get broken and can't heal anymore unless they decide to give you your Corrupt Purge, at which point you become extremely oppressive and survivors basically can't move in open spaces or even at some loops anymore. She also has very good add-ons to make her even harder to deal with, and although a bit map dependent, she can usually do very well on most of them. The last killer in A tier, the Artist. What makes her so good? She can scout for survivors at very long ranges and usually can quickly find them. She's very good in chases and can make many loops very unsafe, forcing survivors to either drop pallets or just leave the loop right away. She can pressure gens without even being there and has amazing synergies with perks like Deadman Switch that can be forced from long range. Now to the S tier, and these killers will come to no surprise as they're easily the strongest in the game at the moment. First we have the Spirit, and she's just good at every aspect of the game really. She can travel the map quickly and even faster so with add-ons. She's good in chase, can close gaps quickly, and most of all is very unpredictable, which is arguably one of the strongest traits in the game. And she got even stronger with the Iron Will nerf some months ago, as it was some sort of a counter to her, but its usage dropped significantly ever since. And the second best kill in the game right now is the Blight. He can just quickly move around the map and pressure gens. His charge got somewhat of a learning curve, but can become more unpredictable the better you get, often leading to almost unavoidable hits. He can quickly break pallets and close gaps. Some maps with small rooms and hallways may be slightly to his disadvantage, but he's generally good on most of the maps. And on top of that, he's probably got the best add-ons in the game. And to no surprise, the best killer by far in the game is the Nurse. And the reason why she's so good is very simple. She breaks the game and ignores the basic mechanics the entire game is built around. A chase becomes very different and may almost feel impossible against top level nurses as she ignores windows, pallets and closes gaps so quickly. She's good on any map of the game and also has good add-ons to complement her playstyle. And that just leads nurse mains to almost become unstoppable with enough experience. And then we also have the Knight. Keep in mind that he's currently on the PDB and might still get some changes, but in the current state I'd probably put him somewhere in the high B tier. He can force survivors out of loops and even some stronger structures very easily, but outside of that his power is actually rarely effective. His power is currently used for zoning survivors more than anything else, and if a survivor just keeps running, he has a hard time catching up to them. As of now he's got some absolutely busted add-ons, but we'll probably see some changes to them before the Knight goes live. I hope we'll also see some changes to his power so it can actually be used more in its intended way. But only time can tell the correct placement of the Knight. This is my final list. Share your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you for watching. You are amazing. I hope you enjoyed and see you next time.